There is a particular kind of exhaustion that almost no one has a proper name for. You are not ill, you are not lazy, you have not clearly failed at anything. Nothing dramatic or catastrophic has taken place, and yet, one day you wake up and feel completely done. Done with people, done with the constant noise, done with showing up and giving everything you have, only to feel like it is never quite enough. Done with trying to explain yourself to a world that never fully seems to understand you. You are tired of everything, and the most difficult part is that you cannot even fully explain why. If this feeling sounds familiar, you are not alone. More importantly, you are not broken. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychiatrists in modern psychology, spent years sitting across from people who felt exactly this way. Patient after patient came to him carrying this same unnamed exhaustion, overwhelmed, isolated, socially drained in ways they could not describe, convinced that something deep inside them was wrong. What Jung discovered about these individuals did more than reshape psychology. It shifted how we understand human consciousness itself. He realized that the exhaustion these people carried was not weakness. It was not mental illness. It was not evidence that they were too fragile for the world. Instead, it was the predictable result of a very specific psychological gift being used in the wrong direction for far too long. Once you begin to understand what that gift truly is, and what it was meant for, the exhaustion starts to feel different, not like a dead end, but like a turning point. There is a type of exhaustion people rarely speak about openly. It is not caused by long work hours, lack of sleep, or trying to fit too much into too little time. This exhaustion runs deeper than the body. It settles into your bones. It wraps itself around your inner world. The people who feel it most intensely are often those who care the most, give the most, and hurt the most, quietly. If you have ever felt completely drained after a conversation that others walked away from unaffected, you know this feeling. If you have ever entered a room and immediately sensed that something was off, even though everyone seemed fine on the surface, you understand it. If you have been told that you are too sensitive, too emotional, or too intense simply for noticing things others ignore, then this may change how you see yourself. Jung observed that the people who struggle the most are not struggling because they are defective. They struggle because they are built differently. That difference, when understood and developed correctly, is not a weakness at all. It is one of the most powerful psychological abilities a human being can possess. Jung believed that most of human life is not guided by conscious thought alone, but by unseen psychological forces we barely recognize. He called this domain the unconscious and dedicated his life to studying it. He found that the unconscious is not only personal, but also collective. Every society, family, and group shares an invisible emotional atmosphere, a web of unspoken feelings, hidden tensions, denied truths, and suppressed fears that no one openly discusses, yet many can sense. Most people move through life interacting only with the surface. They focus on what is said, what is shown, and what is socially acceptable. For them, this works well enough. But there is a smaller group of people who find it almost impossible to stay at that surface level because they are constantly aware of what lies beneath it. They notice the tension in someone's voice that contradicts their words. They feel the sadness hidden behind humor. They sense hostility in a room where everyone appears polite. They detect fear beneath confidence, loneliness behind laughter, and anger beneath silence. This is not something they choose, it is simply how they experience reality. Jung referred to this as a form of intuitive perception, often found in what he described as the introverted intuitive type. These individuals naturally pick up on emotional and psychological information that others do not even register. He estimated that this specific type makes up a small percentage of the population, while broader sensitivity traits may exist in a larger portion of people. This means that a noticeable segment of humanity experiences life in a deeper, more emotionally complex way than those around them. Yet many of these individuals spend years being told that this way of experiencing the world is a flaw. The people who came to Jung did not feel gifted. They felt exhausted, confused, and often apologetic for who they were. And it is not surprising, because for years, sometimes decades, they had been told that their way of perceiving life was wrong. Imagine growing up this way. As a child, you sense things that no one else acknowledges. You feel tension between your parents, even when they insist everything is fine. You notice when a friend is struggling, even when they say nothing. You pick up on subtle dynamics: who holds power, who is hurting, and who is hiding it. When you try to express these observations, you are dismissed. You are told you are imagining things, being too sensitive, or overreacting. You are asked to stop complicating everything. Over time, you begin to adapt. You stop voicing what you see, you suppress what you feel. You start questioning your own perceptions. Gradually, you learn to prioritize other people's comfort over your own truth. You develop the habit of constantly monitoring your inner experience and silencing the parts that might make others uncomfortable. This becomes one of the most exhausting patterns a person can live with. Jung noted that this kind of self-suppression does more than make someone quieter. It makes them invisible, even to themselves. Over time, they lose connection with their own inner signals. There is another pattern Jung frequently observed. These individuals do not just feel deeply, they care deeply as well. That combination often leads them into a particular role in relationships. They become emotional stabilizers for others. In families, they are the ones who sense stress and adjust themselves to avoid adding pressure. They notice when someone is struggling and step in to help, often without being asked. They absorb the emotional atmosphere and try to keep everything balanced. In friendships, they are the listeners, the supporters, the ones who always show up. They offer empathy freely, even when it is not returned. In romantic relationships, they understand their partners deeply, anticipate needs, and work hard to maintain connection, sometimes blaming themselves when things go wrong. In workplaces, they read the room effortlessly. They navigate complex personalities, manage emotional undercurrents, and often receive little recognition for it. This pattern can feel logical. If you can sense what others feel and need, it seems natural to respond. It feels responsible. It feels kind. But there is a cost. When your attention is constantly directed outward, toward understanding and managing others, you begin to neglect your own inner world. You stop noticing your own needs. You lose trust in your instincts about what is healthy or harmful for you. You become skilled at understanding everyone else while becoming disconnected from yourself. Over time, this imbalance leads to the kind of exhaustion that feels impossible to explain. Not because it is mysterious, but because it has been building quietly for years. And because your empathy is real, because you genuinely feel what others are going through, you become incredibly easy to be taken advantage of. Not always by people who are intentionally manipulative, although sometimes that happens too, but often by individuals who are so absorbed in their own needs that they fail to notice they are slowly draining you. Jung described this as one of the most psychologically dangerous positions a person can occupy. You are using your greatest strength in a way that is gradually wearing you down. Your gift quietly turns into your wound. But Jung did not stop there, because he noticed something else in his patients, something that most people in this position are completely unaware of. He observed that even while they were absorbing the pain of others, minimizing their own experiences and questioning their own perceptions, the most sensitive individuals were also doing something remarkable beneath the surface. They were paying attention, not in a casual or surface-level way, but with deep, precise, almost investigative awareness. They noticed every inconsistency. They tracked every contradiction between what someone said and what their body language, tone, and behavior actually revealed. They observed patterns over months and even years. They gathered a vast amount of accurate information about the people around them. And then, because they had been conditioned to doubt themselves, they stored all of that information away and did nothing with it. Jung found this pattern extremely significant because it revealed something important. These individuals were not naive. They were not unaware. They were not in denial in the usual sense. They were something more complex. They had access to highly accurate information, yet they were actively choosing not to act on it, because they had been taught that their perceptions were less trustworthy than the explanations and reassurances given by others. He documented case after case where a person had, for years, noticed clear signs of deception or dysfunction in a close relationship, yet had consistently explained those signs away. Not because they failed to see them, but because truly acknowledging them would have required trusting themselves. And trusting themselves was something they had been trained not to do. Jung recognized this as a kind of slow, unfolding psychological tragedy. All of that perceptual accuracy, all of that emotional intelligence, all of that deeply earned understanding of human behavior being actively suppressed just to maintain relationships with people who were not always worth maintaining. Then something would happen, something Jung documented repeatedly across many cases: a betrayal. Not a small or ambiguous one that could be dismissed or forgiven easily. A large, unmistakable, undeniable betrayal. The kind that makes it impossible to keep choosing comforting explanations over clear evidence. The kind that forces a moment of reckoning. Maybe it appeared as discovering that a partner had been dishonest for years. Maybe it was realizing that a family member had been manipulating a situation the empath had tried so hard to hold together. Maybe it came as a moment of sudden, sharp cruelty from someone they had supported, protected, and given everything to. Whatever form it took, the impact was the same. It broke something open. Jung noted that most people who witnessed empaths reaching this breaking point expected a certain kind of reaction. They expected tears, emotional collapse, or dramatic expressions of pain. They expected chaos. But that is not what usually happened. Instead, what emerged was something far more striking. The person became calm. Not the shallow calm of numbness or shock, but a deep, grounded, almost unsettling calm. Like the surface of a lake after a storm has passed, when the water finally becomes still. Jung wrote about this calm with a sense of respect. He described it as the calm of someone who had finally stopped resisting their own perception. It was the calm of someone who looked at the evidence in front of them and, for the first time, chose to believe it. Because what a betrayal of that magnitude does to a highly perceptive person is not destroy their trust in themselves, it confirms it. It validates every observation they made, every pattern they noticed, every inconsistency they quietly recorded, every internal warning they suppressed. They were right all along. They knew. And now they know that they knew. In that moment, something fundamental shifts. The belief that had kept them stuck, the idea that their perceptions were unreliable or too intense, begins to collapse. And what emerges in its place is something powerful. Jung referred to this moment as shadow integration under extreme pressure. To understand it, you have to understand one of the core ideas in Jungian psychology: the shadow. In Jung's view of the psyche, the shadow is the part of ourselves we reject, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge. It holds everything we have been taught is unacceptable about who we are. For most people, the shadow contains traits like anger, selfishness, ambition, jealousy, and the desire for control. But for highly empathetic individuals, the shadow often contains something very different. It contains their own strength. Think about that carefully. Because of how sensitive people are often raised and socialized, the traits they learn to suppress are not necessarily destructive impulses. Instead, they suppress their clarity, their boundaries, their anger, and their authority over their own inner experience. They are taught that being certain is arrogance, that expressing anger is dangerous, that setting boundaries is selfish, that trusting their own perception over someone else's explanation is immature. And so all of these healthy, necessary qualities get pushed into the shadow. Not cruelty, not malice, not dominance, but the simple, legitimate belief that they have the right to trust what they see, to feel what they feel, and to protect themselves when necessary. Shadow integration is the process of reclaiming all of that. When it happens, Jung observed, it does not make people colder or harsher, it makes them whole. It restores access to the full range of their personality. Care and clarity begin to exist together. Empathy and boundaries begin to work side by side. Sensitivity and strength no longer cancel each other out. The individuals Jung observed did not become less kind after this integration. They became more precise in their kindness. They did not stop caring about others. They began caring about themselves with the same seriousness. He described watching these individuals go through a period of profound transformation after what he called the clarity event. They stopped over-explaining themselves, not because they became indifferent, but because they no longer felt the need to justify accurate perceptions. They stopped apologizing for what they noticed. Instead, they expressed their observations quietly, clearly, and without hesitation. They stopped tolerating situations that required them to pretend they did not see what was happening. Not in a dramatic or confrontational way, but simply by stepping away from those situations. And perhaps most significantly, they stopped feeling afraid of the people who had previously intimidated them. This was one of the most striking patterns Jung recorded. The individuals who had once taken advantage of them, those who relied on manipulation, emotional dishonesty, or their self-doubt, began to feel uncomfortable around them. They could not fully explain why. The integrated individual was not aggressive or hostile. They were not making threats or accusations. They were simply present, steady, clear, and impossible to destabilize or confuse. And that, Jung observed, is deeply unsettling to anyone who depends on confusion or distortion to maintain control. He described this shift as what happens when a mirror becomes unavoidable. For years, the highly perceptive person had reflected back what others wanted to see. Now, they were reflecting what was actually there. And for those who had carefully shaped their image, that reflection became unbearable. At this point, it is natural for something to begin stirring inside you as you read this, because this realization tends to reach people on a deeply personal level. It challenges long-held assumptions about who you are, how you relate to others, and why you have felt the way you have for so long.